The laughter always began before she arrived. It danced on the wind, soft at first like the hum of insects in summer, but it grew sharper the moment Daphne stepped into the market square. Heads turned, voices lowered, and whispers slithered like snakes through the crowd. "There she is again," one voice murmured. "The one who's seen 10 mating seasons, and still no mate. She should be ashamed, walking around like that." Daphne pretended not to hear, clutching the basket against her chest. The smell of roasted meat filled the air, teasing her senses, but the hunger in her heart was louder than the growl in her stomach. She straightened her shoulders, forcing her chin up the way her mother once taught her. "Never let them see your pain," her mother used to say. But today, even her mother's words couldn't shield her. Children giggled as she passed. A few bold ones mimicked her walk, exaggerating the sway of her hips. She ignored them, but the sting pressed deep. Her size had become her prison, her story written in every cruel smile. She was no longer Daphne the brave, the girl who once led the young wolves to train on the cliffs. She was Daphne, the fat, unwanted woman. Her heart whispered otherwise. You were once strong. You were once loved. The memory came uninvited. The day had begun with laughter. The air was sweet with pine, and the sun shimmered on the leaves like gold. Daphne was 16 then, bold and full of fire. The young wolves of the pack gathered on the cliffside, watching her with awe. "You're crazy, Daphne," one of the boys called out. "That jump is too far." She smirked, the wind playing with her brown curls. "You're just scared," she teased, eyes gleaming. Her wolf spirit burned for challenge, for thrill, for freedom. Ever since she was a pup, she had never known fear. "Watch and learn," she said. She shifted in one swift, fluid motion. Her brown wolf stood proud, muscles rippling beneath thick fur. A growl of excitement rumbled in her chest as she crouched low, tail flicking. The others stepped back, half in admiration, half in disbelief. Then she leapt. For a moment she was pure air and power. The world below blurred, and her heart soared. She almost made it across, but almost wasn't enough. Her paw slipped. The cliff crumbled, the world spun. She fell. The scream that tore from her throat was swallowed by the wind. Rocks bit into her body. She hit the ground with a sound she would never forget, the sharp, sickening crack of bones. Pain unlike anything she'd ever known flooded her senses. Her wolf form wavered, trembling before melting back into her human one. Blood spilled from her naked form, her body twisted in unnatural angles. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world dimmed around her. When she woke, the smell of herbs and smoke filled the air. Her mother's face hovered above her, swollen with tears. "Daphne, my child," her mother whispered, stroking her hair. "You're awake." She tried to speak, but only managed a faint groan. The healer's stern face came into view. His hands were stained with ointments, his eyes grave. "She lives," he said softly. "But she must not shift again. Her bones—" He hesitated, glancing at the weeping mother. Her bones were shattered beyond full repair. The spirit of her wolf is still strong, but her body may never bear its weight again. Her mother clutched her hand tighter. "She's strong," she said fiercely. "She will heal." And Daphne did heal. Or so everyone thought. Weeks turned to months. The wounds closed, the bones knit. But something deeper broke that day. The girl who once led the pack pups through the woods now walked with tiredness. Her wolf, once her pride, grew restless inside her. When she tried to shift, her body screamed in protest. The healer's words haunted her. "You must not strain yourself. A second time could kill you." So she stopped trying. Without training or running, her once-toned body softened. Her days grew quiet, filled with long hours sitting by the window. Her mother cooked to lift her spirit, and at first, Daphne barely ate. But grief has strange appetites. Soon food became her comfort, the warmth she couldn't find in her fading dreams. "Eat, my love," her mother would say gently, pressing a bowl of stew into her hands. "It will make you strong again." But it didn't. It only filled the silence. Then, one winter night, her mother fell ill. The fever came fast, cruel, and unrelenting. Daphne sat by her bedside, feeding her broth, whispering prayers to the moon goddess. But the goddess stayed silent. When dawn came, Daphne's mother was gone, her hand cold, her smile frozen. That was the night Daphne truly broke. She buried her mother under the old oak tree, the one that used to bloom with silver flowers in spring. She stayed there for days, refusing food, refusing company. But grief was a beast that never left. When she finally rose, she turned back to the only thing that dulled the ache: hunting, eating, sleeping. And as seasons passed, the village forgot her name. The girl who once rivaled warriors became the woman they mocked. The men who once admired her strength now looked at her with disgust or pity. Her reflection no longer matched her memories. Her wolf grew quiet inside her, trapped and sad. One evening, during the annual mating ceremony, Daphne stood at the edge of the clearing. Drums thundered, laughter rang, and the priestess called out pairs blessed by the moon. She watched as girls younger than her were chosen, one after another, their faces glowing with joy. When the last name was called, the crowd erupted in cheers. Daphne turned away quickly before anyone could see her tears. Just like that, many mating seasons came and passed, but Daphne was never chosen, never wanted, only left with whispers and mockery. She blinked back tears as she returned to the present, her trembling hand dropping a coin on the counter. The butcher, who once smiled at her, now looked away. She muttered a soft "thank you" and walked home. Her cottage stood alone at the edge of the woods, quiet, forgotten, like her. She set her basket on the table and sank into the chair, exhaustion pressing against her chest. The laughter from the village still echoed in her mind. They didn't know how hard she tried. The diets, the sleepless nights spent running under the moon, hoping her body would change. But nothing did. Her reflection had become a stranger's, soft where it was once firm, weary where it was once bright. When night came, she stepped outside. The moon hung full and round, bathing her in silver light. It used to be her comfort, her silent friend. Tonight it felt like a mirror, bright, beautiful, and far away. "Will I ever be seen again?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Will anyone ever desire me for me?" The wind carried no answer, only the faint rustle of leaves. And under that lonely moon, Daphne wept, not from weakness but from the weight of a heart that remembered what it meant to be strong. The howl of dawn echoed through the valley, deep and commanding. It carried the promise of another day in the reign of Alpha Urban, the most respected, most feared, and perhaps the most misunderstood leader the pack had ever known. He stood at the balcony of the castle overlooking his lands, the wind tugging at his dark hair, his eyes hard as obsidian. Below him, the pack moved with precision. Hunters returning from the night's chase, warriors sparring in the clearing, mothers calling to their pups. To any observer, this was the sight of perfection. A pack thriving under a strong and unshakable alpha. Yet, inside him, there was a silence that no victory could fill. Urban exhaled slowly. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, restless, pacing. It had been years since he'd felt truly at peace, years since the ache inside his chest had quieted. The pack adored him, the elders respected him, and the females worshipped him. But at night, when the moon rose high and the world went still, the emptiness returned. He could win every battle, but not the one within himself. A soft step sounded behind him. "Alpha," a voice said, low and respectful. It was Tiberius, his beta and oldest friend. Urban didn't turn. "What is it?" "The council requests your presence. They wish to discuss the upcoming mating ceremony." Urban's lips curved faintly. "They're worried I'll still refuse to choose a Luna." Tiberius hesitated. "The people grow anxious. A pack without a Luna invites weakness. They think it's time you claim someone worthy of your status. Urban finally faced him. His expression was calm, but his eyes were unreadable. Someone worthy, he repeated softly. Tiberius bowed slightly, saying nothing more. He had seen this look before, the look Urban wore whenever the subject of mating was mentioned. When his friend left, Urban walked back into his chambers. The room was vast, carved with symbols of power and protection. The scent of burning cedar filled the air. Gifts from admiring females cluttered the table, silks, jewels, perfumes. He brushed past them without a glance. They came every week, women from noble bloodlines, daughters of alphas and betas. They came in beauty, draped in moonlight and confidence, all hoping to be the one chosen. Some knelt at his feet, offering submission. Others tried to tempt him with charm and promise, but he chose none. His wolf didn't stir for painted lips or delicate figures. No matter how flawless their beauty, their presence left him cold. Sometimes he wondered if the goddess had cursed him, to lead but never to love. He sat by the fire, his fingers running over the edge of an old wooden carving on his desk. It was small, roughly shaped, a wolf with one paw lifted, carved by clumsy hands many years ago. His thumb brushed its surface, and a faint smile tugged at his lips. He remembered. He had been a boy of 12, awkward and shy when he first saw her. Daphne. She had been standing in the training field, her brown hair wild in the wind, her eyes blazing with confidence. She was sparring against 2 boys older than her, and winning. He had been hidden behind a tree, too timid to step out, watching as she laughed and taunted her opponents. She had spirit, unshakable and alive. When she fought, she didn't move like the others. There was something untamed about her, a freedom he didn't yet understand but deeply admired. That day she had shifted into her brown wolf, sleek and strong. Urban remembered how his heart had stopped, how his young self had whispered, "I want to be strong like her." From that moment, Daphne became his secret compass. When others mocked him for being too quiet, too thoughtful, he thought of her laughter. When he trained, bleeding and breathless, he imagined her watching and approving. He grew faster, stronger, sharper, not for recognition, but for the silent hope that one day she would notice him. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. The day she fell from the cliff, he had been there, hidden among the trees. He had watched the crowd gather, their cheers turning to screams. His young legs had trembled as he rushed toward the edge. But by the time he reached her, others had already descended to help. He saw her broken body, the blood on her face, her mother's sobs. The sight carved a scar into his soul that never healed. That night, he had gone to her home in secret, standing in the shadows, watching the healer work. She was pale and still, her once bright energy gone. He stayed until dawn, whispering a promise to the wind. "Get better, Daphne, please." But she never truly did. When she withdrew from the world, so did his light. Years passed. He rose through the ranks, beta, then alpha, but even with power in his hands, he felt hollow. He told himself it was foolishness, that a boy's admiration meant nothing now. But every time he saw her from afar, sitting by her cottage or walking through the village with her head low, something inside him ached. He had tried to move on, tried to let others in, but none could fill that void. "Alpha," came another voice, breaking his thoughts. It was one of the maidens, Nira, daughter of a high-ranking elder. She approached him with practiced grace, her smile coy. "The council awaits your decision for the ceremony. They say the moon shines brightest for those who dare to love." Urban looked at her, eyes steady. "And what do you know of daring, Nira?" She faltered. I would dare anything for my alpha." He rose to his full height, his presence alone enough to make her heart race. "Then dare to leave me be," he said gently but firmly. Her smile faded. With a bow, she hurried out, leaving him alone once more. Silence filled the chamber again, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Urban sat back down, running a hand through his hair. His wolf stirred restlessly, growling in his mind. The moon was nearing its fullest phase, the season when bonds were strongest, when mates were revealed. For years he had resisted the call, fearing that love would make him weak. But now, as the wind carried the faint scent of pine and distant rain, a strange anticipation stirred in his chest. He didn't crave beauty. He didn't crave perfection. He craved truth, the kind that once shone in a young girl's eyes as she defied the world without fear. As the sun dipped below the mountains, casting shadows across his face, Urban made a silent vow. If the goddess willed it, he would no longer run from what his heart had long known. This season he would choose, not for power, not for duty, but for the one soul who had unknowingly shaped his every breath. The moon was full, heavy, and luminous, a silver crown hanging above the forest. Its glow bathed the clearing where the entire pack had gathered, their voices blending into a low hum of excitement and expectation. It was that time of year again, the mating season, when hearts aligned, bonds were sealed, and destinies intertwined beneath the watchful eyes of the moon goddess. Drums beat softly at first, then louder, echoing through the trees like the steady pulse of life itself. The air smelled of pine, smoke, and wildflowers. Young wolves adorned with wreaths of white petals danced around the fire, their laughter carrying across the night. The priestess stood in the center, her silver robe glittering like starlight as she raised her staff. Tonight, her voice carried through the crowd, the moon bears witness as hearts are joined and souls find their halves. Let those who have been chosen step forth and be bound. Cheers erupted as the first pair came forward, two young wolves, their hands trembling but eyes glowing with joy. The priestess blessed them, and the crowd howled in celebration. One by one, couples stepped up. Each pairing was met with applause, laughter, and good-natured teasing, except for Daphne. She stood alone at the edge of the crowd, half hidden in the shadows. Her dress, simple linen with faded embroidery, hung tight around her shoulders. She forced a smile, pretending to share in the happiness of others. Her fingers twisted nervously around the hem of her shawl. She had come only because absence would spark more gossip. Her heart wasn't built for more humiliation, but the cruel curiosity of the pack never rested. They would talk either way, about her weight, her loneliness, her supposed bitterness. A group of young women nearby whispered, their laughter slicing through the music. 10 years, one said mockingly, and still unclaimed. Maybe she hopes the moon goddess will bless her this time, another giggled, or maybe she ate her mate before he could be born. Their laughter stung, but Daphne stood still, swallowing her pain. She had learned long ago not to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The priestess lifted her staff again, signaling the final pairing. The fire crackled louder. A hush settled as the crowd waited. This time Alpha Urban stepped forward. The shift in the air was instant. The laughter died. Conversations halted. Every eye turned to him. His presence commanded silence even before he spoke. Tall and broad-shouldered, draped in a dark cloak that shimmered faintly in the moonlight, Urban walked with the unhurried grace of power. His gaze swept across the crowd, searching, measuring. Whispers began to ripple like wind through leaves. Is he finally choosing? After all these years? It must be Lady Nira. The elders said her family's been preparing a feast. No, perhaps it's Alara, the one from the southern ridge. She's been flaunting herself all week. Daphne listened without meaning to. Her heart thudded painfully. Even after years of disappointment, some foolish part of her still longed to be seen, still longed for someone, anyone, to look at her and not turn away. The priestess turned toward Urban and bowed deeply. Alpha of the pack, the moon blesses your choice. Speak the name of the one your spirit calls home. The clearing fell utterly still. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the distant rustle of the trees. Urban's gaze stopped moving. his eyes fixed on a single figure standing at the edge of the crowd. Daphne. Her breath caught. No, she thought wildly. He couldn't possibly. But then, his voice broke through the silence, strong, deep, and unwavering. I choose Daphne as my mate. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. No one moved, no one breathed. Then the murmurs began, faint at first, then louder, sharper, uglier. Daphne? The fat one? Is this some kind of joke? He's mocking the goddess. Maybe the alpha's gone mad. A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd, quickly joined by others. Even the priestess blinked in stunned disbelief. Daphne stood frozen, her mind blank. Her chest felt tight, as though the air itself had vanished. She stared at Urban, waiting for him to correct himself, to say it had been a mistake. But his eyes never wavered. He began to walk toward her. Every step he took sent fresh waves of whispers through the clearing. Some gasped, others scoffed, but all watched. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the drums. When he stopped in front of her, she couldn't bring herself to look up. He reached out his hand, firm and steady. Look at me. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted her eyes. And what she saw in his gaze wasn't pity. It wasn't mockery. It was something deeper, steadier, something that made her throat tighten. He took her hand. A shocked gasp rippled through the crowd. Even the priestess's staff wavered in her hand. Alpha, she said cautiously, the goddess witnesses truth. Are you certain? Urban's gaze never left Daphne. I am. The priestess hesitated, then slowly bowed. Then let the moon bear witness. The crowd fell into uneasy silence. Some turned away. Others watched with grim fascination. Urban and Daphne stood together before the sacred flame. The priestess lifted her staff once more, her voice solemn as she recited the ancient vow. Two souls bound beneath the moon's eye, two hearts joined in spirit and in blood. Let the goddess bless this union, and may the bond never break. Urban reached out, brushing his thumb lightly over Daphne's wrist. The touch burned, warm, steady, real. Then he leaned forward, and with the precision of the ritual, sank his teeth gently into the soft skin of her neck. The crowd gasped. Daphne's body stiffened, pain flaring for a moment before a strange warmth spread through her. A golden light shimmered faintly where his mark bloomed, the mark of the alpha. When he pulled back, his eyes glowed faintly with the light of his wolf. He looked at her, wordlessly waiting. Her breath came uneven. Every eye was on her. Every whisper pierced her skin like thorns. She could end it here, refuse, turn away, spare herself and the alpha this humiliation. But something deeper stirred inside her. Maybe it was longing. Maybe it was defiance. Her trembling fingers brushed his neck. Her wolf rose weakly within her, answering his call. Then, with quiet resolve, she bit down just above his collarbone. The taste of him was wild and electric, his energy thrumming through her veins. The crowd erupted in murmurs once again. It's done. He truly chose her. Unbelievable. The priestess raised her staff one final time. The goddess has witnessed your union. From this night forward, you are Alpha and Luna, bound by spirit, sealed in blood. The drums resumed, but their rhythm felt hollow now. The joy that usually filled the ceremony was gone, replaced by an uneasy silence masked by forced celebration. Daphne stood beside Urban, her body trembling, her heart caught between fear and disbelief. Around them, wolves danced and drank, pretending to celebrate what they could not understand. She dared a glance at him. He met her eyes and gave the faintest nod, his hand still wrapped around hers. Firm, grounding. When the flames burned low, the priestess dismissed the crowd. One by one, the pack dispersed into the shadows, their whispers trailing behind. And when the last of them was gone, only the two of them remained beneath the moonlight, bound, marked, and standing in a silence heavy with everything that had just changed. The chamber felt like a golden cage. Everything shimmered, the marble floor, the velvet drapes, the firelight dancing across the polished walls. Yet Daphne sat in the midst of it all, hollow and unmoved. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her gown, and her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. The faint scent of pine and smoke filled the air, but it brought no comfort. She could feel Urban's presence behind her. Steady, quiet, suffocating. He hadn't said a word since they entered. Neither had she. Finally, his voice broke the silence. "You haven't spoken since the ceremony." She didn't lift her gaze. "What is there to say, Alpha?" The way she said Alpha, distant, stripped of warmth, stung more than she realized. Urban moved closer, his heavy steps measured. "You could start by telling me why you're angry." She gave a short, sharp laugh. "Angry? No, I'm just confused." She finally looked up, her brown eyes shining with unspoken hurt. "You could have chosen anyone. Every woman in that gathering would have given anything to be your Luna. And yet..." Her voice wavered. "You chose me." He met her gaze evenly. "I did." "Why?" she asked, her tone breaking between disbelief and bitterness. "Why humiliate me like that in front of everyone?" Urban frowned. "Humiliate you? I offered you respect." "Respect?" Her voice rose. "You call it respect, to make me the subject of gossip? To let them think you did a noble deed, the great Alpha taking pity on the broken fat wolf who can't shift?" His jaw tightened. "That's not why I chose you." "Then tell me why," she demanded. "Tell me the truth." He hesitated, his lips parting, but the words he truly wanted to say remained buried. He couldn't tell her how long he'd admired her strength for so long, or how he had strived to be like her, just to gain her recognition. Instead, he said quietly, "Because I wanted to." Daphne's breath hitched. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to believe nothing," he replied calmly. "But I will not apologize for my choice." Her eyes burned. "Then you truly are heartless," she whispered. "You think you can play savior and call it choice." He took another step toward her, his tone steady but low. "You think too little of yourself, Daphne." "Do you blame me?" "What's there to be proud of?" she shot back. The air between them thickened, charged, sharp, alive. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled faintly, its warmth mocking the chill between them. Daphne rose to her feet, her hands clenched. "I won't be anyone's possession, not even yours. If you expect me to obey, to bow, to act like you own me, you'll be disappointed." Urban's gaze softened, not with pity, but with something deeper, quieter. "I don't expect you to obey," he said, "and you don't belong to me. You never will." Her lips parted, caught off guard by his calm. "Then what do you want from me?" He held her eyes. "To find yourself again." Daphne froze, uncertain of what to say. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Not with dominance, not with mockery, but with understanding she didn't ask for. She turned away, unable to meet his gaze. "You think words can fix years of mockery and pain? You think standing beside you suddenly makes me whole again?" "I don't think it will," he said softly. "But maybe it's time you stopped letting their laughter decide who you are." The silence that followed was unbearable. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, matching the quiet hum of his wolf's energy in the room. At last, she whispered, "You shouldn't have chosen me." He sighed, not out of regret, but quiet resignation. "Maybe. Or maybe you were the only one I could choose." Their eyes met one last time, his full of quiet storm, hers trembling with pride and pain. And in that fragile, fleeting second, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Not love. but the faint understanding of two souls who carried the same emptiness. Without another word, Urban turned toward the adjoining door. "The room is yours," he said, his tone distant again. "No one will disturb you." Daphne nodded stiffly. "Good." He lingered for a moment longer, then walked away. The heavy door closed behind him, leaving only the faint echo of his scent: pine, storm, and restraint. Daphne stood alone in the quiet chamber, her heart an aching knot of anger and confusion. She wanted to despise him, to call his choice a mockery, yet the steadiness in his eyes lingered in her mind, and the sincerity she refused to believe haunted her still. She walked to the window and looked out into the moonlit forest. The night wind brushed against her face, carrying the faint howl of wolves united in joy. Her fingers brushed the new mark on her neck. Still warm, still strange. A Luna of pity. She murmured bitterly. "That's all they'll ever see me as." But deep inside, beneath the ache and the pride, a whisper stirred, quiet, uncertain, but alive. What if he didn't choose you out of pity? She clenched her jaw, pushing the thought away. Tonight she would sleep alone, but neither she nor the Alpha slept peacefully. For somewhere between pride and pain, the bond between them had begun to breathe. The sun rose over the packlands, spilling golden light across the Alpha's courtyard, but for all its beauty, it couldn't brighten the gloom that clung to the castle. Servants whispered as they swept the corridors, voices low but sharp enough to pierce through stone. "Did you see her again this morning?" one maid murmured. "Out in the woods, chasing rabbits like some wild beast." Another snickered softly. "A Luna covered in dirt and blood. What a sight. She's supposed to lead us, not compete with the hunters." Laughter followed, cruel and careless. They thought she couldn't hear. But Daphne did. Every word found its mark, yet she never flinched. She walked past them with her head high, her bow slung across her shoulder, her fingers still stained with the scent of her hunt. If they wanted a spectacle, she would give them one. She dropped the carcass of a deer on the kitchen slab, ignoring the startled gasps of the servants. "Clean it," she said flatly, "and don't waste the blood." When they hesitated, she turned, her brown eyes fierce, though the ache behind them was almost visible. "Did you not hear me?" They obeyed instantly, bowing slightly. But as soon as she left, the whispers began again. "Does she eat all that alone? Maybe that's why the Alpha looks thinner lately. She's devouring everything. She hunts more than the warriors. Perhaps she thinks food can make her a better Luna." Daphne heard it all. And though she tried to act as if the words meant nothing, each one cut deeper than claws. By midday, she sat in her chamber, alone at the table. Before her was roasted meat, plenty of it, the smell rich and heavy. She tore into it slowly, chewing without joy. The silence around her felt heavier than ever. Once, she had eaten for comfort. Now, she ate to fill the emptiness that the world kept reminding her of. She hated herself for it, yet she couldn't stop. From the upper balcony, Urban watched her. He stood still, his hands gripping the rails as he saw the woman he loved, the woman who had once burned brighter than the sun, sink deeper into her invisible cage. His wolf stirred inside him, restless and aching. But what could he do? He had offered kindness. She turned it away. He had tried to show affection. She rejected it as pity. Every path he took toward her ended with walls. He closed his eyes, pressing a hand against his chest. Through the mate bond, her pain pulsed like fire beneath his skin. It came in waves: anger, shame, loneliness. It was suffocating. Some nights it kept him awake, pacing before the hearth while the world slept. His beta, Tiberius, entered quietly that afternoon. "My lord," he said carefully, "the people grow restless. They say the Luna brings shame to the pack." Urban didn't turn. "Let them talk." "With respect," Tiberius continued. "Your silence gives them courage. They question your judgment, Some even whisper that the moon goddess blinded your wisdom. The alpha's eyes darkened, but his voice stayed calm. Tell them to speak before their alpha if they are courageous enough. Tiberius hesitated, then bowed slightly. Yes, my lord. He paused before leaving. She hunts alone again today. The wolves mock her behind her back. Maybe you should... Should what? Urban snapped, his tone sharp enough to freeze the beta in place. Maybe remind her she's not just anyone now. She's Luna. Urban's expression softened, the anger draining as quickly as it had come. He rubbed his temple, exhausted. You think I haven't tried? Tiberius bowed his head and quietly exited. That night, Urban found Daphne outside again. She sat by the fountain behind the castle, a slab of cooked meat in her lap. The moon painted her face in pale silver, and for a moment, she looked like the ghost of the girl he once knew, the fearless girl who had rivaled warriors. He walked closer, his voice low. You shouldn't be out here this late. She didn't look up. Why? Will the forest laugh too? Urban sighed, sitting beside her. You're Luna now, Daphne. People look up to you. She cut him off sharply. No one looks up to me. They look down at me, Urban. Even your servants whisper when I pass. Do you think I don't hear them? His heart twisted. You shouldn't listen to them. She laughed bitterly. Easy for you to say. You're alpha. They worship you. He turned to her. And yet you endure every look, every word, and still face the world each morning. Endurance isn't the same as strength, she said, her voice trembling. Sometimes it's just survival. Urban's chest ached. Through the bond, her sorrow seeped into him, raw, heavy, unbearable. He wanted to touch her, to say something that could reach her heart, but words felt useless against a wound carved by years of ridicule. Daphne, he began softly, you're hurting yourself. She stiffened. Don't start this again. You hunt alone, eat alone, live alone, even when I'm right here. You're building walls so high even your wolf can't breathe. Better walls than pity, she said coldly, rising to her feet. Go back to your pack, Alpha. Rule your people. Let me deal with my shame my way. She turned and walked into the trees, her figure melting into shadow. Urban sat there long after she was gone, staring into the quiet water. His wolf whimpered inside him, not for power, not for dominance, but for the one woman who refused to let him in. When he finally rose to return to the castle, his reflection stared back from the water, a strong alpha on the outside, but hollow within. He clenched his jaw and whispered into the night, If only you could see yourself the way I do, Daphne. The sun had barely risen when Daphne entered the marketplace, hoping to blend into the morning crowd. But as soon as she appeared, whispers fluttered like cruel wind through the stalls. There goes the Luna who eats more than 10 wolves combined, one woman muttered. And the Alpha who bows to her gluttony, another added with a smirk. Daphne's fingers tightened around her shawl. She forced herself to keep walking, head held high, pretending not to hear. But the laughter trailed her like an invisible chain, clinking and mocking with every step she took. Near the meat stand, she saw a group of young men drawing shapes in the dust, round figures, wobbling, exaggerated. They burst into laughter as one said, Behold, the mighty Luna hunting for her next meal. The market roared. Daphne stood frozen, her chest heavy with shame. Then she saw something worse. One of them drew a smaller stick figure beside the large one and said, And here's the weak alpha who obeys her every growl. Her heart stopped. Later that afternoon, she returned to the castle, the echoes of mockery still chasing her. The corridors felt too quiet, the walls too judgmental. Her steps slowed when she heard voices coming from the council chamber. The door was slightly open. Against her better judgment, she leaned closer. The pack grows restless, my lord, an elder was saying. We need strength, not pity. A Luna should bring honor, not humiliation. She brings me neither humiliation nor pity. Urban's deep voice answered. steady but sharp. Then why do you allow her to run wild like a beast? Another elder pressed. You protect her when the pack mocks you. You sit silent when they question your leadership. Do you not see how her weakness makes you weak? There was a long silence before Urban spoke again. His tone low, controlled, yet trembling with barely contained anger. You will not speak of my mate that way again. Then prove your strength, the first elder challenged. Reclaim respect before it's too late. The pack whispers of replacing you. You are losing your throne over a woman who doesn't even act like a Luna. Daphne's breath caught. The word replace stabbed like a knife. She pressed a trembling hand to her lips, her heart hammering painfully in her chest. Inside, a chair scraped violently against the floor. Let them try, Urban growled, his voice rising like thunder. I lead this pack not with fear but with purpose, and if defending my Luna costs me my crown, then so be it. The elders went silent. Daphne stepped back, heart racing, tears stinging her eyes. She turned and fled down the hallway before they could see her. That night she sat in her chamber, staring at her reflection in the mirror, the swollen face, the heavy body, the eyes full of silent misery. For years she had thought her pain belonged only to her, but now she saw it differently. Every insult thrown at her was a blade that cut Urban too. When the moonlight spilled through her window, she pressed her hands to her chest and whispered, "He's breaking because of me." For the first time in years, the food beside her, freshly roasted meat, felt tasteless. She pushed it away and bowed her head. Urban hadn't tried to tame her. He hadn't scolded her for the gossip or her reckless hunts. He had defended her in silence, even as the world turned against him. And for the first time, Daphne began to feel something unfamiliar. Guilt, yes, but also a spark of understanding. She realized that beneath his calm strength, Urban carried a burden heavier than her shame. Care without return, protection without gratitude. And for the first time since her fall, Daphne's heart whispered a question she could no longer ignore. But why does he still care for me? Daphne stood by the door for a long moment before entering, her heart thudding against her ribs. For hours she had sat on her bed, thinking about the council meeting she had overheard. The way Urban's voice had risen, trembling with both fury and pain. How he had defended her before men who would gladly see her gone. But she saw it in his eyes too. The exhaustion, the quiet strain of a man carrying too many battles at once. She couldn't pretend anymore. His pain had become hers. His shame. Her own reflection. When she finally entered, Urban was standing by the window, his broad shoulders cast in silver light. He didn't turn to face her. "Why are you suffering because of me?" Daphne asked quietly, her voice trembling as it broke the silence. "The people despise me, Urban, and it's affecting your leadership. They question your strength, your judgment, everything. Why do you keep defending me?" Urban didn't move. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them like a chasm. Then he finally turned, his dark eyes meeting hers, sharp, unflinching, tired of holding back. "You gave them the right to despise you," he said flatly. Daphne blinked, stunned. What do you mean?" He took a slow step toward her. "You gave them power to insult you. You are Luna, yet the common drunk in the market holds more dignity than you." The words cut through her like a blade. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. There was hurt in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She only stood there clutching her robe tighter as if it could protect her from the truth she didn't want to hear. Urban sighed and crossed the room, his boots soft against the stone floor. When he reached her, his tone softened. He sat beside her on the long wooden bench near the hearth. The first time since their mating, he allowed himself to sit so close. The warmth from the fire glowed on his face, casting away the fierce mask of an alpha. "Daphne," he said gently, taking her hand. His voice dropped to a whisper. "I didn't choose you out of pity. I chose you because I know you. The real you. The woman hiding behind pain, loss, and grief. I have always seen you. And if you let me in, I will help you find yourself again. Her breath hitched. She looked at him, really looked. And for once, she didn't see the commanding alpha. She saw a man stripped bare, his eyes vulnerable, his shoulders heavy with something unspoken. You talk as if you know what I've been through, she said softly, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. Urban's gaze darkened with emotion. Without warning, he reached out and cupped her face. His palm was warm, steady, yet trembling with something that felt dangerously close to desperation. I have known you all my life, Daphne, he said, his voice low but fervent. As a child, you challenged me to be better. I admired the fire in you, the courage that burned brighter than any torch in the night. You dared to do what none of us could. You weren't afraid of falling. You weren't afraid of living. Her eyes widened, her breath caught. We were almost age mates, he continued, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped her eye. But you outshone all of us. I longed to be seen by you, to be noticed. You were like the sun, and I was the boy who chased your light. The only way I thought I could ever stand beside you was to become your equal, or something greater. He gave a faint, rueful laugh. But I never got that chance. Not after your fall. Daphne's throat tightened. The fire crackled between them, the flames reflecting in her tears. But it didn't stop me, Urban whispered. I visited your cottage in secret, waiting, hoping one day you would return to the person you once were. But it never happened. Every day I watched you sink deeper into pain, and it broke me in ways you can't imagine. Her heart clenched painfully. When you lost your mother, he said softly, you gave up completely. I saw it. The light in your eyes fade, the laughter vanish. You walked through the market pretending not to care, but I saw the tears you wiped when no one was looking. I watched you cry, Daphne. I watched you fight battles you shouldn't have fought alone. And yet, even with all your pain, you carried yourself with grace. The way you moved, the way you pretended to be strong. It was heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. Urban's voice trembled slightly, and Daphne realized he wasn't just remembering, he was reliving it. Though you buried yourself in shame, he whispered, I never stopped believing that the real Daphne was still there, somewhere behind the walls you built. That was why I chose you, because I never stopped seeing you. He paused then, his chest rising and falling slowly. His eyes softened, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I chose you because I have always loved you. The words landed like a storm. For a long moment, Daphne couldn't breathe. The world seemed to still. The fire, the air, her pulse. Everything froze. Urban held her gaze unflinching. Her lips trembled. You loved me? Always, he said simply, even when you didn't believe you were worth loving. The tears came without permission, sliding down her cheeks one by one. Her walls, the ones she had built so high and strong, melted under the heat of his words. Urban, she whispered brokenly. The girl you're looking for, she's long gone. Look at me. She gestured at herself, her trembling hands brushing over her sides. Look at my size, my scars. What could I possibly be now? Urban didn't flinch. He moved closer, his hand finding hers again. You've survived this long alone, he said quietly. That takes strength. The fire is still in you, Daphne. You just buried it under the ashes of what you lost. Let me help you. You don't have to do it alone anymore. Something deep within her cracked open, a pain she had carried for years, unseen and unspoken. For so long she had believed that her story ended with the fall, that she was nothing but a shadow of who she once was. But now, staring into Urban's eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in years. Belief. For the first time, someone saw her, truly saw her. Not the body she hated, not the mistakes she made, not the whispers that haunted her name, But her breath trembled as Urban's hand brushed against her cheek again, this time without hesitation. The warmth of his skin felt grounding, real, like a promise. "You don't need to be who you were," he murmured. "You just need to remember who you are." And as they sat there in the quiet glow of the fire, the tension between them slowly dissolved into something softer, something fragile but real. The alpha's heart was laid bare, and Daphne, the woman who had been invisible for so long, was finally seen. No more pity, no more shame, only truth. Something shifted that night. Something sacred and irreversible. Urban had confessed what his heart had carried for years, and Daphne, for the first time, allowed herself to believe that she could still be loved. The atmosphere within the castle changed after Urban's confession that night. Daphne no longer hunted. The wild craving that once drove her to the forest every day seemed to fade, replaced by something calmer, purer. Her days of sitting alone, devouring endless pieces of meat were behind her. Urban had gently introduced healthy meals into their lives, fresh fruits, grilled fish, vegetables, and herbs that restored balance to her body. At first, Daphne resisted, shy and doubtful. She would poke at her food, wondering if such small meals could ever satisfy her enormous hunger. But Urban was patient. He didn't force her. He simply ate with her, smiling and talking as though the meal itself was a celebration. They ate together every morning and evening, and soon Daphne realized that what had truly fed her before wasn't meat. It was loneliness. The empty silence had been her hunger, not her stomach. In the evenings, she would sit beside Urban in his chamber. There she listened as he spoke about the affairs of the pack, disputes between farmers, the training of warriors, and the responsibilities that came with being Luna. He never spoke down to her, never made her feel small. Instead, he treated her like an equal. When she asked questions, he answered patiently. When she made suggestions, he listened with genuine attention. Slowly, Daphne began to see herself not as the mocked, oversized Luna they had called her, but as someone with purpose. Every morning before sunrise, Urban would take her into the woods behind the castle. At first, she could barely run beyond a few steps before her chest tightened and her legs trembled. Sweat poured down her face as she gasped for breath. Urban never mocked her. He would simply jog beside her, his tone gentle but firm. "Breathe through it, Daphne. Don't fight your body. Listen to it." And she did. Day after day, her steps grew lighter. Her pace grew faster. The pain that once made her feel like a burden became a reminder of her strength. Within weeks, she was running side by side with Urban, her laughter echoing through the woods. There were moments when she stumbled and fell, and Urban would kneel beside her, brushing the dirt from her palms. "You're stronger than you think," he would say with a proud smile that warmed her from within. The pack began to notice the change. In the market, whispers of mockery grew faint. The people were beginning to remember what loyalty meant. Daphne herself could hardly believe how much had changed within her. Her body grew firmer, her movements lighter, her eyes brighter. But it wasn't just her body that transformed. It was her heart. She began to look forward to her days, to conversations with Urban, to moments of shared silence. She found herself smiling for no reason, her chest filled with an unfamiliar peace. One night, after a long day of running and learning, Daphne stood by the balcony watching the stars. Urban joined her quietly. "You've changed everything," he murmured. She turned to him, her voice soft. "You gave me the reason to." He smiled, stepping closer until his warmth surrounded her. "No, Daphne. You gave yourself the reason. I only reminded you of who you are." She looked up at him then, her heart swelling with something deep and unspoken. The moon bathed them both in silver light, and for a moment it felt as though the world itself had paused to watch. The glutton Luna was gone. The broken woman who once hid behind walls of shame was gone. What stood beside Urban now was the Luna she was always meant to be. strong, graceful, and reborn through love. The long oak table gleamed under the morning sun that streamed through the high windows. The elders sat in their usual order, wise men with silvered hair, proud warriors with scars that spoke of their battles, and the young advisors who whispered among themselves. Urban sat at the head, his posture firm yet calm, the symbol of power and restraint. Beside him, the Luna's seat stood empty, until the doors opened. Daphne entered quietly, dressed in a simple flowing gown the color of moonlight. The room fell into silence. Even the air seemed to still. Every eye turned toward her, some in shock, others in admiration, a few in disbelief. She did not lower her gaze this time. Her steps were steady, her presence radiant yet humble. She bowed slightly before taking her seat beside Urban. He gave her a subtle nod, a gesture that said, "You belong here." The meeting began as usual, with discussions about food supplies, training schedules, and border patrols. Daphne listened, her eyes moving from one speaker to another, absorbing every word. She did not interrupt. She was calm, too calm for those who expected her to crumble under pressure. Then came the first dispute of the day. Two pack members, both farmers, had clashed over the use of river water for irrigation. Their argument had divided the northern households, and the council had been unable to settle it for weeks. One of the elders turned to Urban. "Alpha, we await your decision." Before Urban could speak, Daphne's voice cut through the silence, clear, warm, and firm. "May I speak?" A few elders exchanged glances. Some frowned, others leaned forward with curiosity. Urban nodded slowly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes bright with quiet pride. Daphne rose to her feet. "I have heard of this matter," she began, her tone steady. "And I believe the problem is not water. It is fear. Fear that one man's gain means another's loss." Her gaze swept the room, meeting the elders' eyes one by one. "But if we let fear rule, we lose the unity that makes us a pack. What if, instead of dividing the river, we share it? What if each farmer takes a time to draw from it, and together we build a storage pond that can serve everyone during the dry season?" There was a murmur in the hall. One of the younger advisors whispered, "A pond?" Daphne smiled softly. "Yes, a pond. My mother once taught me that when wolves work together, they create abundance. When they fight among themselves, even a full moon cannot feed them." Her words sank into the air like music, gentle, powerful, unforgettable. The elders who had scoffed at her before now looked thoughtful. Even the farmers, standing at the far end of the hall, lowered their heads in agreement. For a moment, silence reigned, the kind that follows truth. Finally, an elder, the oldest and most skeptical of them all, spoke. His voice was deep and gravelly. "Luna, your words carry wisdom. You speak like one who has watched the seasons and learned from them." Daphne bowed her head respectfully. "I have watched many seasons, Elder, some in silence, some in tears, but I've learned that growth only happens where peace is planted." The council erupted in nods and murmurs of approval. Urban said nothing. He simply watched her, his expression softening as he realized what was unfolding before him. The meeting went on, but it was Daphne's voice that guided it. She spoke again when a debate arose about warrior discipline, suggesting that strength without compassion would only breed chaos. When a young advisor questioned her, she answered him with grace, never once raising her tone. Her empathy disarmed even the most hardened men in the room. By the time the meeting ended, the elders who had once avoided her gaze now bowed their heads as she passed. Outside, news of the Luna's wisdom spread faster than wildfire. By sunset, the markets were alive with whispers of her name, not in mockery, but in awe. That night, as she returned to her chamber, Urban was waiting for her by the balcony, bathed in moonlight. He turned when she entered, his eyes shining. "You were magnificent today," he said softly. Daphne laughed, shaking her head. "I was terrified." He walked closer. Even in fear, your voice held truth. She looked up at him, her smile tender. I only said what needed to be said. Urban cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek gently. No, he whispered. You spoke what needed to be heard, and you reminded them why Luna's voice matters. For a long moment they stood there, the Alpha and his Luna, no longer bound by shame but united by respect and love. The moon hung high above them, glowing softly as though blessing their union. For the first time, Urban's heart, once void and scarred, felt full. He had always believed in her, but now she believed in herself. The afternoon sun draped the valley in gold. The scent of pine and wet soil hung in the air as a gentle wind brushed across the ridges. Birds sang softly from the trees, unaware of the silent storm rising inside Daphne. She stood at the top of the old cliff, her fingers clenched tightly around the edge of her robe, staring at the distance that had once changed everything. Urban's footsteps were slow behind her. He hadn't spoken since they left the pack house. He didn't need to. The tension in Daphne's shoulders, the distant look in her eyes. He understood all of it. This was not a place of beauty to her. It was a graveyard of dreams. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. It feels closer than I remember. Urban glanced at her. That's because you've grown stronger than your fear. She turned to him with a faint, uncertain smile. Stronger? Or just tired of running from it? Sometimes, he said quietly. They mean the same thing. They stood there for a while saying nothing, the sound of rushing wind filling the space between them. Daphne's eyes roamed the rocky face of the cliff, tracing the cracks, the moss, the faint outline of the ledge that had once given way beneath her. In her mind she could still hear it. The scream, the cracking of bones, her mother's voice crying through the chaos. Her heart beat faster. Her knees trembled. This is where it ended for me, she whispered, where I stopped being me. Urban stepped closer, his presence steady and grounding. Then maybe it's time this place stopped holding that power. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wildflowers. Daphne closed her eyes, breathing deeply, feeling the rhythm of the earth beneath her bare feet. Her heart pounded, not from fear but from the weight of memory. She looked at him then, truly looked. At the man who had watched her fall, who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. His eyes were soft, yet fierce, like the wild itself. And suddenly, she knew what she had to do. Urban, she said quietly, if I can't face this, I'll never really move forward. He frowned slightly, already sensing her intent. Daphne. But before he could stop her, she began to undress, letting the robe fall from her shoulders. Her breath came fast, shallow. Her hands trembled, yet her eyes were steady as she stepped toward the edge. Urban's pulse quickened. Daphne, don't. I have to, she interrupted. It's time I take it back. Then, under the glow of the descending sun, her body began to shift. Her bones realigned, her form glowed faintly, and within seconds, where Daphne once stood, now stood a great brown wolf, powerful, graceful, and alive. Her fur rippled like silk in the wind, her golden eyes locked on the opposite cliff, the same gap she had once tried to conquer. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then she ran. The ground thundered beneath her paws. The air whipped past her fur. For one terrifying moment, her body soared, suspended in midair over the abyss that had haunted her for years. And then, she landed. Perfectly. Her claws dug into the opposite cliff soil, and the ground held firm beneath her. No breaking, no falling, no pain. Just silence. Urban's black wolf emerged seconds later, his powerful frame gliding through the air to join her. When he landed beside her, they stood still for a long moment, two wolves against the sunset, the Alpha and the Luna side by side. The orange light kissed their fur, and the wind sang through the valley, carrying the scent of triumph. Daphne turned to him, her eyes glistening with tears. Through their bond he felt her emotion, not sorrow this time, but peace. She shifted back first, her breathing heavy, her cheeks wet. Urban followed, his tall frame glowing in the sunset's light. "I did it," she whispered almost to herself. Urban smiled faintly. "You didn't just jump a cliff, Daphne. You jumped out of your past." Daphne stood before Urban, her heart racing, not from fear this time, but from something fierce and tender, something she had tried to bury for far too long. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for him. "You loved me," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of emotion. "Even when I couldn't love myself, even when I gave up on everything and you never gave up on me." Urban's breath caught. The strength that had always defined him faltered beneath the gentleness in her voice. He stepped closer, his hands finding her face with reverence. "Daphne," he murmured, "I didn't love you because you were perfect. I loved you because you were real, because you survived when the world tried to break you." Her tears fell freely now, warm against his thumbs as he brushed them away. "I was so afraid," she confessed, "afraid that no one could ever see me again." "I saw you," he said softly, "even when you couldn't see yourself." The space between them vanished. His forehead rested against hers, their breaths mingling in quiet rhythm. The world around them faded. No pack, no titles, no shadows of the past. Just two souls standing in the silence they had both longed for. Then his lips found hers. It wasn't the kiss of an alpha claiming his Luna. It was the kiss of a man finally meeting the woman his heart had waited for. It was gentle at first. A question, a promise, then deeper, raw, filled with all the years they had been apart even while living side by side. Her fingers wove into his hair as the tension melted between them. The ache that had once lived in her chest gave way to warmth. Deep, consuming, alive. Every touch was a conversation, every breath a vow. Urban pulled her closer, his arms encircling her with a care that made her tremble. For the first time, Daphne didn't shy away. All that existed was the rhythm of his heart against hers, steady, grounding, real. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. The fading sunlight bathed them in gold, and Daphne's tears glistened like stars. "Urban," she whispered, voice soft but certain, "you've given me back everything I lost, and more." He smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No, Daphne. You found your way back yourself. I only reminded you where to look." She leaned into him then, resting her head on his chest as the wind danced around them. There were no more words needed. Their silence spoke louder than any vow. And as night crept across the horizon, the two of them stood together, no longer Alpha and Luna, no longer broken and whole, but equals. Souls intertwined not by pity or destiny, but by choice. Months had passed since that day on the cliff, and the story of Luna Daphne had become more than a tale. It had become a legend. Gone was the timid girl who hid behind shame and silence. In her place stood a woman radiant with confidence, her laughter echoing through the halls of the Alpha's court. Her steps were sure, her presence commanding, yet gentle. The people who once mocked her now bowed their heads in admiration. Under her guidance, the pack prospered. Disputes were settled with wisdom, borders were guarded with unity, and young wolves learned that true beauty was born from courage, not perfection. The market square, once filled with whispers of scorn, now buzzed with songs about the Luna who changed their hearts. One quiet evening, Daphne walked alone to the cliff, the place that once held her pain. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers and freedom. She stood at the edge and smiled softly. The setting sun painted her in gold, her eyes reflecting peace. She whispered, "Thank you for breaking me so I could be reborn." And as the wind swirled around her, it carried her words through the valley, a whisper that would be remembered for generations. Thank you for running with me through every moonlit night, every stolen glance, every heart-stopping twist of Daphne and Urban's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a comment below. Tell me your favorite scene, your favorite character, and what moment made your heart race the most. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next love story we create together, under the moonlight. You are the reason these stories live, breathe, and shine. Until the next one, stay wild, stay brave, and keep howling at the moon.